Welcome to Draft Sickos on the No Ceilings NBA YouTube channel and podcast feed. This is the show where we discuss everybody from the biggest of names to the deepest of sleepers. I am Maxwell Baumbach, and I'm joined by the real star of the show, Stephen Gillespie. Stephen, how are you doing tonight?
Maxwell, I'm awesome. Coming off the heels of a very good SummerSlam. You know, we're both wrestling fans. I feel like we probably got some wrestling fans that listen and watch as well. It was a good card. We were talking about it a little bit before we kicked off. You were a little bit lower on it than probably the consensus. I thought it was a good card overall. Nice, clean matches, but Roman Reigns coming back, dude. That was pretty wicked.
It's big. I'm excited for that. I'm extremely excited about the prospect of world champion Gunther. Like, world champion Gunther is something I am extremely excited about. Gunther could wrestle a broom, and I would pay money to see it at this stage. But yeah, they elevated Damian Priest, I thought, throughout that feud. Really good stuff for the wrestling sickos. So with that, we're going to turn over to basketball, what the people came here for. And we're going to discuss the recent No Stone Unturned column that I did, the Wings Part 1. I always do 3 wing groups for No Stone Unturned. So if there's like a really good wing and you're like, why haven't you covered him? I might still cover him, or he's too big of a name. One of the two. So, or I just missed on somebody. Last year, I didn't cover St. Thomas, for example, and he had a stellar season. So there's always going to be guys that I miss that slip through the cracks. Like, it's always going to happen. Michael Ajayi, another one who like had a big breakout year out of nowhere. It happens. So can't bat 1,000, but singled out some guys that I really like, that I'm really excited about. I think for the format tonight, we're going to focus a lot. There's 2 guys in this group that we're both really particularly in on. And then we're going to kind of go a little bit quicker through the final 3. But let's lead it off. So the column is sort of in the order of how much I like the guys. And tonight we're going to go sort of in the order that Stephen likes them, which I think is fun. So if you read the article, you can get my take on it. And then we'll kind of look at it through Stephen's lens a little bit tonight as well. The guy that you are fond of is someone that we've actually talked about on this show before. And that is Brooks Barnhizer out of Northwestern. He is 6'6". He's a senior, the rare high major guy in the series that's always been a high major guy. So we'll do some background, some stats on him. So Barnhizer grew up in Indiana, son of a former Purdue and Auburn player, Mark Barnhizer. He played 6 years of varsity ball in high school, which is cool. Started playing varsity as a 7th grader. Was a 3-star recruit, a lot of Midwest interest. Ended up going to Northwestern. Didn't play much as a freshman. 6-man role as a sophomore, and then as a junior had a really big breakout season. He was 3rd team All Big Ten and a Big Ten All Defensive Team member this last season. Tested the draft waters, decided to return to school. Last season, he averaged 14.6 points per game, 7.5 rebounds, 2.6 assists per game to only 1.5 turnovers, 1.8 steals per game, and 0.8 blocks. Shooting splits of 42.9% from the field, 34.8% from 3, 76.6% from the free throw line. Sort of one of these do-it-all wing players. He is 6'6". He's about 225, or I think 215 pounds. Very strong legs on Brooks Barnhizer. And just one of those really savvy players. We do have a wingspan on him as well, 6'11" wingspan, so good size. You like Barnhizer a lot. I like Barnhizer a lot, so I covered him. I think he's the guy who could sneak into the draft this next year. What do you like about Brooks Barnhizer so much that when, we talked about the groups, he was the guy in this group of wings that you said, hey, this one's my favorite?
Well, I think too, and just some more bio stuff to put out there. When he's drafted, Maxwell will be 23, so he'll be a little bit older. I just think that the shooting numbers don't really do him justice because of how much Northwestern just relies on him. I think that whenever you look at him, obviously, white dude plays at Northwestern, you're probably thinking he's just going to be a 3-point sniper. He does a lot of ball handling for Northwestern, and I think that goes kind of underdiscussed for an underdiscussed player, right? Like, that's, I think, going to be something that a lot of people are going to have like this preconceived notion of who he's going to be as a player as he kind of steps into like the mainstream draft prospect forefront. He does have a good handle too. It's not just like a back you down, operate in the mid post. Let me use my strong frame to my advantage. I just think that the fact that he's good with the ball in his hand lends him to be one of these guys that you could see translate into the NBA, because if you're going to be a wing, you have to dribble to some capacity, right? And then the shooting touch comes into play. Again, I think that the numbers don't really do him justice because the form is great. I think the shooting touch is nice. And he can shoot off of movement, whether that is catching and shooting off of movement or, again, off of the bounce. So I think that really kind of like diversifies his shot portfolio a little bit. The consistency does need to improve. And again, Maxwell, something that you and I harp on all the time. This dude has like good strength and good athleticism for his position. So I think when you initially put on the film, like those are the things that kind of stand out to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm really with you on the shot in particular. So, yeah, let's just kind of zoom out on the offense real quick. I think bringing up the handle is like super important. I think it's a huge part of what draws me to Barnhizer. Is so often the guys that we see succeed in the NBA are these guys that like take on a higher usage role and have to do a lot of stuff in college that they don't necessarily end up doing in the NBA. And one thing I've started to do in No Stone Unturned this year is put in like this guy, he reminds me a little bit of, and then like three guys where it's not a direct comp, but like there's some of the same stuff. And Jaime Jaquez was one of the guys I brought up with Barnhizer.
I love that.
It's a lot of the same like herky jerky, pump fake, misdirection, like handle stuff. Now Jaime is a better functional athlete. He was a little bit slicker with the ball, a little bit quicker. Better leaper than Barnhizer. So like, that's what I'd say the difference is, but that same sort of like feel and just ability to get the defender off balance and then hit tough shots is there. Barnhizer 44.4% on pull-up twos and 34.5% on pull-up threes. Where I'm buying the shot with Barnhizer is a lot of what you said, where it's like, there's a good volume, there's a good difficulty, he had a higher percentage later in the year, he got going during Big Ten conference play. But looking at his guarded versus unguarded numbers, he was only at 27.5% on unguarded threes this year. He actually shot a better percentage on guarded ones. Yeah. So it leads me to believe that if there's any variance, he's probably a little bit better at the unguarded shots than he showed this past season. But again, really good in the mid-range, really good passer, like really sharp guy who just sees openings when they happen.
Yep.
One of those guys, like when he does get downhill, if a helper like comes to, for instance, like if he's attacking from one of the slots, going toward the middle of the paint, someone comes to help with the nail. He just quick either hand will just dish that ball to the shooter that just opened up. Even if it's not something that leads directly to an assist, it's stuff that kind of continues that momentum and advantage and keeps the defense moving. But yeah, good at finding rollers, good at finding cutters, like just knows how to play the game. And had a turnover rate below 10. So another just real low mistake player with a real degree of savvy to him. Needs to get better at the rim is sort of one of my concerns. His first step is fine. Yep. Like, I don't think he has like a bad first step. I just don't think he's a super functional leaper. And like, he just ends up way below the rim a lot. So as it stands, I think there's like questions about how he scores at like the two most important areas of the court, like behind the 3-point line and at the rim. That's where like I have a little bit of pause with him, but I do buy the shot. And I think the shot might be enough to kind of get him where he needs to go. And he was also like better at the rim a year ago. He wasn't great, but he was like acceptable. But I think if he can shoot, and I think there's like a real chance that he can offensively, and we can talk about the defense in a minute. Like, I think offensively, he has all the stuff you like, where he's like got good size. He's really strong. He's not going to make mistakes. He can make pretty advanced, sharp decisions and like hit shots. And like, he doesn't poop his pants if he has to do a little bit more with the ball than like just take a shot. Like, I love Seth Lundy to death. Like, Seth Lundy's a guy I love, but if it wasn't like drive or shoot, Seth Lundy didn't really have a ton to offer. And he had a great year in the G League. Like, I'm not saying like Seth Lundy's not going to be an NBA player long term, but like that's a flaw that Brooks Barnhizer doesn't have, even if he's not as good going to the rim.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And you seem like you're a little bit more in love with the passing and playmaking than I am. I think that he's just going to be a fine, like, next pass, keep the ball type guy, right? I do think that he is capable of more reads, but most of the turnovers that I saw was whenever he was trying to be a little too nice with it. You know what I mean? And I think too, team context, like Northwestern is a fine team, but he's not like laden with other playmakers and distributors and stuff. Like, they kind of lean on that aspect of Brooks too. And he's able to carry them a good distance. I mean, you're talking about an NCAA tournament team as well. I think that the fact that his offense kind of propelled them to such level of greatness, I think that speaks to like how well he can kind of scale up into the NBA while also scaling down his role a little bit. Like you're probably not drafting him to do so much with the ball in his hand or to make those fine reads, but maybe, just coming off of a DHO, put the ball on the ground, a quick next passed over, or maybe 2 dribbles and make a decision, something like that, right? I think that he does have some ambidexterity too in his finishes. He wasn't like super one hand heavy or one side heavy. And I think too, before we get into the defense, that something that you and I always talk about, Maxwell, besides the strength, rebounding, he's a nice rebounder too, right? So the fact that he can get rebounds offensively and defensively on top of being like one of these projectable shooters and decision makers with the ball in his hand speaks well to how well he should probably be able to scale up. And I don't think that either you or I are looking at him as like this is like a surefire first round guy. But I think too, just based off the offense alone, and then we could talk about the defense, I think that this is like a second round possible draft pick with him. And I think that's like a very, very realistic possibility.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. So the defense was really impressive this year. So you touched on the rebounding, like rebounding all over the defensive class, 7.5 boards per game with the defensive rebound percentage over 20, which is great. But really good defensive playmaker, like gets a lot of those like pick off pass steals where like if you throw a lazy pass when he's on the court, like it just is a turnover. Had good shot blocking numbers. Like I think based on how he talked about the offense, you might like not think this guy blocks any shots, but he does. Sure. Like he has really good timing. He can get in low on guys, like just knows where to be, like very, very in tune, very communicative as well. Like always talking things out. He's always really light on his feet. So he like when it's a switch situation, if he like all of a sudden someone's coming off a ball screen, he's got to switch and now meet him at the rim. Like he can get blocks in those plays because like just footwork wise, he's ready for it. The anticipation is there. The sort of like quick reaction time is there. Again, really strong. It's like a guy who can have success throwing his body on people. But the combination of like block rate over 2.5, defensive BPM over 2.5, steal rate over 2.5, like pretty rare, especially when you throw in the rebounding, like just really, really productive on the defensive end. But like you watch the tape and it's just like really obvious he knows how to defend within a team concept. And he's laterally agile enough and strong enough to like cover a couple positions and be fine. I would say my biggest concern is just like, does it scale up well at 6'6", 215, 6'11" wingspan? Like, is he going to be quick enough to contain NBA wings? Is he going to be strong enough to make up for it if he's not? And like, if the shot isn't going, how much of a positive does he have to be defensively to stay above water and stay in an NBA rotation? Is I think where you can get a little bit dicey with it. But really phenomenal defensive season, especially when you consider that he took on a bigger role than he had a year ago and like across the board was better on defense.
I think that makes a lot of sense, dude. You touched on a lot of the same things that I picked up on. I think that he slides really well. Like his footwork is nice. I just think athletically, he's probably in the stereotypical category of a sneaky athlete, I would say, right? He is not just an athlete. I think he is a sneaky athlete. But the footwork is nice. But what concerns me is his ability to get vertical while sliding. I think that is kind of is probably going to be a little bit of his problem. I think that he is strong enough that where he can maintain his line. But if he does get a beat off of the wrong read, his recovery is going to be a little bit bad. And so is his ability to get up and get vertical and contest that. But team defense wise, I agree with you. I do think that his closeouts are nice. I do think that he understands rotations well. He is very kind of like premeditative in what he wants to do defensively because you see this sometimes with upperclassmen, Maxwell, where they just have seen several things offensively that they kind of understand it, right? And they get a good read on it. But anything that's going to require like any sort of like quick responsivity on his end, I think that's going to be where he's a little bit hung up, which is why I do have him like in this kind of second round territory, because I do think the offense is good enough to be kind of like potentially late first, early second, but the defense is where I have a few question marks. And I don't know if anything Northwestern is going to do this year is going to kind of help answer some of those questions or concerns.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. Like my biggest hang up with him, I think overall is just like the scoring efficiency, where it's like he had an effective field goal percentage of like 48 this last year. And it's like, all right, now Boo Booey's gone. Like now this is your team and you're leading the ship and you need to be more efficient. So like what I'm looking for this season with the Barnhizer tape is like, can you hit threes consistently? Can you show a little bit more bounce and be more effective at the rim? And can you at least look like a little bit quicker to the point that I feel comfortable with you guarding more NBA wings? Like those are the things I'm looking for going to the tape. I think it's possible. Like this is a guy that was, again, like an okay 6th man a year ago and like kind of a scrub the year before that. Like to be frank, like this is not a guy who played real minutes, played under 100 minutes as a freshman at Northwestern. Like the trajectory is really encouraging. So I do think there's a path for him to make his way into the 2025 draft. Whether he does or not, I think it's interesting to see. I think he's a guy that's probably like a Portsmouth guy at worst. And at best, he hears his name called on draft night. So we will take a quick break, and we're going to come back on the other end and talk about Washington State's Cedric Coward. All right. So this was my favorite guy in the column this week. So I've since I've started this series, I've started to make a habit of like, I want to pick one guy every year that I do a second time. And last year was Mark Williams, now at Kentucky, previously at Drexel, who like, I just can't quit. Like there's certain guys as a prospect where I'm like, I've just seen a little too much that I can't like shove you all the way out the door. That's how I felt about Amari Williams. With Cedric, I'm just like so encouraged. So last year I included Cedric in the series after he scored like 7 points per game in the Big Sky. And like the advanced numbers were wild. Like you could not do a Bartorfic search and not come across him, but still it's like the counting number, like what, I don't know. It was a little risky to like put him in there, but I really liked what I saw on tape. I loved the advanced production. Comes back this year and like everything's a little bit different, but he takes some really big steps forward. So Coward is a 6'6" wing. We've got a wingspan on him as well, 7-foot wingspan. So great,
love that.
Great measurements, probably like 210, like good build. Started off at a D3 school, Wilmette. Plays against Eastern Washington in an exhibition and drops like 22, 7, and 5 against them. Goes in the transfer portal after freshman year. Eastern Washington's like, hey, we remember this guy. And they bring him.
Let's dog ear that game. Yeah.
So has a really productive season as like a hustle and bustle role player. Sophomore year, they lose a ton of talent. Like Angelo Allegri, he goes to the pro. Had a couple other guys graduate that were like legit prospects. Steel Ventures transferred out the year before that. So like the depth chart just kind of opened up for it to be his team this year. Had some ups and downs, like really struggled early in the year when they played good competition. But by the end of the year, it was really clicking. In Big Sky play, he averaged 16.9 points per game on 60.3, 42.5, 90.2 splits and earned a all Big Sky first team selection. On the year, 15.4 points per game, 6.7 rebounds, 1.7 assists to 2.2 turnovers, 1 steal, 0.9 blocks, 56.5% from the field, 38.3% from three, and just under 90% at the free throw line. I'm going to toss it to you first on Cedric Coward. Like when you see Cedric Coward, like what type of player do you see, and what do you like, and what don't you like?
Well, so he's interesting. You know, we're talking about Brooks Barnhizer, and you and I are both like probably in that like top 60 range, if not maybe just right outside of it. Whereas Cedric Coward, I want to put him up that high, but right now, as I've gone through like 80 something preseason profiles, I'm looking at him in like the 70 range right now. Could slide down a little bit, but he's just right outside, and I think he's a very interesting prospect to monitor throughout the year because he just looks long on the film. Before I even got the wingspan from you, one of the notes that I put down is like, he's a pretty long athlete, emphasis on the athlete. I think that he moves well away from the ball. Usually whenever we look at a guy like Cedric Coward, when you just kind of look at his kind of like basketball profile, you would assume that he's going to be one of these camp in the corner until I get the ball and then I want to cook with the ball on my hand. But Cedric is constantly moving away from the ball. I do think that his shooting motion looks very fluid and nice. He can and does take contested jumpers, and he complements the shooting with nice touch on the inside of the paint as well. And again, I emphasize the second time in my notes, like a good athlete. I do think one thing that I am concerned about with like translatability, a lot of his game, Maxwell, is predicated on like mid post play, like back to the
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
basket.
He posts up a
And
lot.
he does post up a lot, but I do think that he is capable of much more like NBA style offense where he can hit mid range shots, like coming off of a screen, get to a couple dribbles and just pull up and hit. He can catch and shoot. But I do think that the areas that I would like to see him improve on is not so much of your offense being predicated on the post. And I would like to see more emphasis on becoming a better playmaker, because I do
Yes.
think that
Yeah.
his decision making leaves a lot to be desired. But again, capable off the bounce, not reliant to do like this kind of on ball self creation. And I do think though that like while he does dribble and he is capable, there's not a lot of pressure put on the rim. It's either all outside or like mid post ups. There's not much like north to south with the ball in my hand movement, and there's not enough playmaking for me right now. I think that those are the areas of his game offensively that if he can address those to like a meaningful level this year, that's whenever I'm probably looking to start putting him within my top 60.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's more than fair. So, offensively, I think he's like a stellar off ball player. Like, and I thought that stuff showed up as a freshman. So, or as a sophomore, rather. I keep forgetting the T3 year.
Yeah.
So as a sophomore, he was like totally connective and like mostly was just a cutter. He only took 1 3 per game as a freshman, but he hit a high percentage. This year, he went from taking 1 3 per game to 4.2 per game and made 3%. So he can really shoot. Like, hit some really deep ones, like can hit him off movement. Like, I love how he sets his feet when he moves into a shot. I think that's a real strength of his, like really good at just controlling his body, his balance, his momentum when he does have to move into it. And so good at cutting, like really good timing, really good bounce, fantastic touch. Like, we are now at back-to-back years of him shooting over 68% on his twos. So two D1 seasons, he's 72.1% on his twos. Like, great touch, above the rim bounce. Like, I love all of that. I am with you when it comes to the ball handling. Like, the fact, and like, let's not overlook the shooting leap. Like, I'm not like trying to be like cruel. I'd be like, he can't dribble, but like, look at the point A to point B on the shot. Went from like barely shooting to like legit knockdown guy in 1 year. Impressive. As a leading option too, to go 38.3% from deep on good volume is really impressive. Last year, the ball handling was rough. And like, that's when he had those problems against good teams. It's turnovers. Like, he turned it over a lot against those good teams. If you look at the sophomore year numbers, he had a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. And it was because he can make those connective passes. Like, he can see the game pretty quickly when it's like, you got the ball and make a quick decision. When he puts it on the deck, it like turns into a different thing. He really doesn't look beyond his man. So like, there'll be plays where he breaks down his man and then someone is in the way and he just like runs into him and turns it over. Or like, he doesn't quite know what decision to make when he gets to the basket by himself. Like, he has these great numbers at the rim, but he's an inefficient driver because when he's dribbling to the basket, like, everything's just sort of out of whack. Like, he's got to be able to dribble from like point A to point B, or like at least make like just a basic quick read and like be prepared for what the second line of the defense is bringing toward you. That to me is my biggest concern, because like, these guys that can like shoot and cut, it's like, that's great. And there's places where you can be plugged in, but like, you've got to be able to dribble and make reads off the dribble in the NBA. Like, so often you're just going to be you're going to be chased off the line and you have to do something. Like, you can't just be entirely connective or entirely off ball. Like, it just does not exist in this modern NBA. There's so few guys that get to play that role. And that's where I have my hangups offensively. And again, like, I do think the fact that he can connective pass can help. I need him to be able to dribble. I need him to be able to attack a closeout and figure out what he's doing going downhill.
And I agree with you. And I think that's why I have Brooks and Cedric in separate tiers, because it's not like we're asking him. I feel like anytime I talk about, like, I'm not asking you to be Kyrie Irving, because, you know, wouldn't even ask Kyrie Irving to be a Kyrie Irving. Right. But I just think that with Cedric, a lot of his playmaking, like the best plays are kind of like this Vince Williams Jr., Isaiah Crawford, Jalen Slauson type, where it's back to the basket and you're letting kind of everybody kind of like rub off or like scale around you. And that's fine if you are like a physically imposing kind of like forwardy type player. Cedric, I think, is going to be best served to be.
Oh, lost you a little bit there.
I'm sorry. I think
you're good.
got lost there.
You're back. What's up? You're good.
Yeah, sorry. But I think that, a lot of the, if you're
going
to
like
be
Jalen
on the
Slauson
perimeter,
and those kind of guys.
Yeah. If you're going to be on the perimeter, you have to be able to create on the outside. And the best way that you're going to be able to do that is to do it off of the bounce. Right. So that's where I think that he could stand to make the most improvements. But the good news is that he's going to have the kind of runway to be able to do that because he can shoot. Right. And he is a good athlete and he's good playing in open space. So I do think that the shooting ability opens up the playmaking. We just need to see him capitalize on it this year.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think those are great points. Let's talk about the defense. So I like the defense quite a bit with him. Counting numbers were down a little bit this year in a bigger role, but through 2 D1 seasons, steal percentage of 2, block percentage of 3. Really like how he helps around the basket. Like really good when he is the low man. But even on the perimeter, like one of those guys who can just like fly into passing lanes. On the ball, like my one gripe with him defensively is I think he can use his length really well, and he's pretty strong. I like how he can test, like he gets up off the floor really quickly. This is weird. I actually wrote about this in the column. I was just looking at my notes. Right-handed shooter who blocks everything with his left hand, which is like super odd. Like I've never, like I cannot, as a right-handed person, I can never imagine.
Can I speak?
Can
I speak to that? So in my heyday as a basketball player, right? 2 things that I could always do in high school and pick up is I shoot and I'm a right-handed shooter.
Yeah.
But defensively, when I'm guarding, right, I am better. I kind of have like, this was my trademark, right? Like if someone's dribbling against me and they're driving, like I could always poke out the ball if they're driving to my left. I could always poke it out with my left hand, but I could never duplicate it with my right hand, being a right-handed shooter. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, I don't know how I do it. It's just I'm better at poking the ball out to my left, but I'm a right-handed guy. It's just something that I kind of always have had.
That's interesting. Yeah, I thought
even
that was
science
so
can't
odd.
Explain it.
Yeah. My one gripe with him defensively is I think he's one of those guys who like doesn't know how good his feet are, and like he plays way too deep off of guys. And I'm like, you don't need to do that. You don't need to do that. Just get tight on him. That's my only gripe with him defensively. Otherwise, I think he's like a really good defensive player with like NBA tools and length. So.
Yeah, I think that he gets real vertical on defense. And when I say like get vertical, I'm not talking about like he can just jump high, like contest, like get his hands up to prevent fouling. I think that he does that really well. I think that he's got good closeout technique. I think that the scalability is there because of the length, because of his like physicality, the strength. But what's interesting is as good as an athlete as he is in a lot of areas, I don't think that his foot speed on defense is that great. So I think that that does affect him on his recovery. But other than that, man, like you, that's just like nitpicky stuff. I think that he is going to be a capable defender. I just don't know how many positions, right? I'm probably thinking like 2s and 3s, and everyone wants to be a 4 or 5 position defender. I don't think there's anything wrong with being like a serviceable 1 or 2 position defender. And I think that that's what Cedric can do. And again, defensively, there's not very many holes that I see in his game. I just, my biggest questions with him come on the offensive end, as we've already discussed.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think just whether or not he's like a G League guy or an NBA guy comes down to like, what can you do dribbling? Like that's kind of what it comes down to. I'm in on Coward. I liked him a lot last year. And I just like love guys that make dramatic improvements. And maybe that's like a flaw. Maybe that's like over indexing on like a certain thing, and shooting and dribbling are 2 completely different things.
Yeah.
But I love that I know the work ethic is there. Like I love that I know that. I don't often get into the intel weeds on this show, but like I have no problem putting out there that like I've talked to a lot of people around Cedric Coward and they have nothing but great things to say about him. Like even people that like truly have nothing to gain from being like he's great, like love him. So like he's going to get stellar character reviews, and that's going to matter. Like a guy, like I think a lot of people might have been surprised that like David Jones like did not have a great combine, still got a 2-way. People love David Jones. Like if you talk to anybody that saw David Jones practice or like was around David Jones, like people buy David Jones the person, And like, Jamal Shad is like another example of this, like somebody that people loved. Like, I'm not saying Cedric Coward is either of those guys, but like, I think the character stuff is going to be very flowery, and I think people are going to eat that up. So I think if he has a good year, that's going to like really put him over the top. I think if he kind of stagnates a little bit, that'll still kind of keep the foot in the door. And, maybe he at least gets like a summer league look or something like that, even if it's not, a huge step forward this year.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, Cam Spencer, another one of those guys that,
yes, yeah,
you hear nothing but great things about the play review. And it's important. I think people would also be surprised too, that like when you talk to people who are around players, like depending on who you talk to, you got to get plugged into the right folks, but some of them will give you like dead honest, like, hey, they need to get better at X, Y, and Z. And, sometimes they might have attitude problems or whatever, but it's good to hear that about Cedric, because I mean, it makes sense. Like, you hear some of these character reviews and like, sometimes you feel like you can see that on the court between like season 1 to season 2 to season 3, like how we're seeing with Cedric.
Yeah. So really, really, really excited to see him this year, especially Washington State is now going to be in the WCC. So we're going to get to see matchups with him against like Gonzaga, who have like a ton of wing prospects. Yeah. Like San Francisco's got some interesting guys that I kind of like. So there's some interesting guys matchup wise for him in that conference this year. So we're going to take one more break. We're going to go through the final 3 guys in the column. Stick with us. All right, we're going to lead it off with one of these kind of just oddball productive up transfers that I like quite a bit. It is Jacksen Moni, who will be playing at North Dakota State this coming season. He was previously at Northern State, a Division II program, sort of a late bloomer. Got to talk with Jacksen for the article. Basically just said that like recruitment was kind of slow. He was a chubbier kid growing up, and then like COVID happened. It's like just didn't get a ton of eyes on him as a senior, and just sort of slipped through the cracks. Had 3 offers. One was at Northern State, and it was the best place for him. Really slowly put it together there, and had a stellar junior season. 21.3 points per game, 8.1 rebounds, 3.6 assists to only 2.2 turnovers, 0.8 steals, 0.9 blocks. If I mentioned that he is 6'10",
love that.
Quite interesting. Had a 40-point game against Winona State, which is a team that has won the Division II title. Like they're always a great they are a great program year over year. So to put up 40 can seem like that matters quite a bit. Was 47.4% from the field, 32.9% from 3. Bit deceptive of a number there. Took 5.5 attempts per game. Career mark is closer to 36%, and he made 88.6% of his free throws. Thoughts on Jacksen Moni, who reminds me a little bit of, I put OKC, Jalen Williams, Joe Ingles, and Dario Saric, sort of one of these skilled jumbo 4s that's going to be transferring up from the Division II ranks. What did you make of Jacksen Moni's game?
I think he's funky, man. It's hard for me to not fall in love with a funky player. I just think that, at 6'10", about 225, he'll be 22 on draft night, which is another big plus for him. As a wing who can probably spend a lot of time as a forward as well, I think he gives you that level of versatility. Moves the ball really well. I think that's probably one of the more unheralded aspects of his game that I was anticipating coming in to the film dive, is that he moves the ball really well. He's got good size, obviously at 6'10", but the shooting touch to complement it is just, it's a pretty stroke, man. Even on grainy, bad film, it is a pretty observable stroke as well. And I think that it's got good range. The one thing I will say is that, with the good ball movement, he likes to make kind of risky passes. And I wonder if that was just like, hey, I'm a top dog at D2 and I'm killing it. Like, I'm going to kind of go out here and show my stuff a little bit. I do think that if he scales down some of those risky passes, this year at South Dakota, I think that he's going to stand out with his size because of the shooting and then the playmaking that he has with him as well. I think that he's got good soft touch in traffic. Again, I like his vision. He's a persistent rebounder. I love his shooting mechanics. He is not super strong, which I think too, given like the resources that he was probably had and, coming to the game late,
physical late bloomer,
COVID, all that fun stuff. I think that there's some ground to be made up on that end, but overall offensively, I just think 6'10", fluid movement, Doesn't look like he hurts when he runs. You know what I mean? And then
Yeah,
also
yeah.
can shoot, can pass, can dribble. I think that's like there's some interesting tools to his game that I think that it's probably going to be a little bit of a disservice that he's still going to be playing at like a smaller end college. But I think, there's talent everywhere and people are very observant as to where players play and why they do. I think that if he has a big year, he's probably going to be like, I could easily envision it, Maxwell, to where he's like, okay, let's get you in Portsmouth. Let's get you to some of these other combines, work your way up if everything tracks well. But I'm
like
excited,
Tristan
man.
and Aruna sort of run.
Exactly, yeah. Tristan and Aruna, that's a good call because different like
player
similar frames,
type.
different player types and roles and stuff like that. But I don't know, man. He's funky. It's hard. Like whenever I was given this assignment to like watch these 5 dudes, like I was thoroughly impressed because I thought it was just going to be kind of underwhelming, and I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, he's so odd. Like he's one of those guys that like the first time I watched him, I was just like really interested, I guess is the word to go with. Like there's just not a lot of guys that are that big that have like the type of ball skills that he has. And maybe it's like over indexing. Like maybe this is the classic, like something I've been thinking about a lot is like these 4s that can like defend a few positions and shoot, but like they really can't dribble. And then like, because that it's like, maybe you'd be better off just taking a guy who's like 6'7" and does those things instead of a guy who's like 6'9", 6'10", but like
a Jay Crowder type. Yeah.
Yeah. Like maybe you're better off like that kind of guy. Like maybe I'm over indexing on like, wow, a tall guy with a lot of skills. Like I'm overlooking certain things, but like, I do think Moni is so interesting because it is so rare to see a guy who's that tall that can do that sort of stuff. 47.2% on pull-up threes. Like I said, 36% on high volume for a 6'10" guy over his 3 college seasons. Excellent free throw shooter. Not like he's pretty slow is like the big like knock on Moni. From other people that I've like brought him up to and like, hey, what do you think? Like he's not fast, but he is really fluid. And I just think those like Joe Ingles, like Bogdan Bogdanovic or
Santi Aldama
kind of guys like
type.
like Santi, like those kind of guys where it's just like they still are just so sharp and fluid that they can kind of get away with it. Like Jalen Williams is sort of in that same boat as well. Like he's not like going to sprint inside and dunk on somebody if he's got a lane at the basket. I think that's something you like hope he develops this year when he's at a D1 program, but like he just sees the floor so well when he attacks. Like he can run delays. Like there's just so many things that you can do with him that have NBA functionality, whether it's literally just like space the floor from the corner and make good decisions, or it's like, we're going to involve you in these actions. Like there's a lot of ways that he can positively impact the game offensively while limiting his mistakes. Defensively, I would say is probably where I have more questions to your point. Like the strength worries me a little bit. He is like slotted as a jumbo 4. He's very Coleman Hawkinsy, where it's just like, he just doesn't move that well. Like does not get up that well. Like he's not going to protect the rim at a high enough level to probably ever play the 5 at the NBA or like really just like a high level professional level in general. I'm really intrigued to see like what the defense looks like this year, because I thought last year it felt like there was a lot of plays where like I wanted him to rotate to the rim and you could see the rim rotation and he didn't make it. And I didn't know, is that like a conserving your energy thing? Is that a staying out of foul trouble thing? Or are you just not like recognizing that in time? Because if it's that, it seems a little off given how good the feel is offensively. My concern with Moni is like, does he go into this year and like produce really well offensively in the Summit League, but be a guy who averages like 0.4 steals and 0.3 blocks? Because if it's that, then like you'll be great in Europe. And that's phenomenal. Like you will make serious money over there, but that like then like it's just not an NBA discussion at that point. And like that's kind of my hang up with him. But I'm really intrigued. Like I think he's got a real shot to like, to your point, like be one of those guys who gets into Portsmouth and makes a real run at everything.
Yeah, I think defensively, gets his hands up, again, that verticality, not just leaping, but like getting his hands up. I think that is probably what stood out the most to me on defense, but his footwork is kind of sloppy. Especially on rotations and recoveries. Screen navigation is not the greatest either. So I think that you really kind of hope that you hide him a little bit. The shot blocking isn't great enough, or the ball tracking isn't great enough that you put him like a roaming role. But I don't know. Maybe South Dakota kind of gets more out of him, like that, that he's going up in, stature of school, maybe coaching, maybe resources, things like that. Get a little bit stronger to improve your lower body strength, to improve your athleticism. Like you're saying, though, Maxwell, I think that the offense is so fluid and smooth that you're kind of disappointed in the fact that, like, he doesn't move that great defensively, but it feels like we come across that type of player more often than we like to think.
Yeah.
In college, where it was like, how are you so good at offense, but you can't do the thing that you can't stop the thing that you're so good at,
Yeah,
I think that is something that's kind of like how you're saying that you're a right-handed shooter, but you block shots with your left hand. Like, how do you do that? It's like, I don't know. I just do, So maybe we see that with Jacksen, but I'm interested in tracking him. I think that
I am too.
I like him more among this group just because of like what could be instead of what necessarily is.
And the block numbers were like better a year ago too. So it's also one of those things where I'm hoping like maybe things are just a little bit different and he really cooks this year. So yeah, I'm intrigued to monitor that.
Connect is the truth in the comments. Yes.
Yes.
We agree. We love Dalton Connect.
No Stone Unturned Prospect 2023, Dalton Connect. Next guy on the docket, Myles Rigsby from Troy, a 6'5" wing. He's going to be a sophomore this coming season. He is staying at Troy. Dual sport athlete in high school, played football and basketball. And boy, oh boy, do you see the football in terms of how he plays on the court.
Was he a quarterback?
I don't know.
Basketball as a quarterback. Okay.
That's a good question. I tried to see if he had like
probably a receiver.
I tried to see if he had like a 24/7 sports page for his football recruitment at all, and I couldn't find one. But yeah, really amusing story as to how Troy came across him. Talked to Scott Cross, who's their head coach over there. He is a former player, DeMarcus James, who was a high school coach. And he's like, yeah, like DeMarcus always tells me like to check out his guys. And I'm like, yeah.
Sure. I'll get there, bud. Yep.
And then he got a text. Scott Cross gets a text from Myles Rigsby being like, hey, coach, it's me, DeMarcus's player. Come watch me. And he was like, what is this? Like, what is happening? And then he was at an AAU tournament with his son. Scott Cross's son was like a really great prep player who's actually going to be at Troy this year. And he was like, I have an AU coach that like I know and trust, who came up to me and was like, I've got a player you've got to watch. And he was like, who is it? He's like, Myles Rigsby. He's like, oh my gosh, like the guy that my former player is texting me about.
Leave me alone.
The guy who texted me. He's like, and he was like, within 2 minutes, I loved him. Like within 2 minutes, I was like, oh yeah, this is like a guy I want at my program. Kind of checked all the boxes for them.
It's funny how Myles Rigsby recruited the coach.
Yes, an inverted recruiting scenario that paid off really well. And he was saying too, is like, I can't believe like this could be in Texas, that like more of these Texas schools weren't just all over, but maybe it's like the portal era thing of like, I'm just looking for older guys, but a W for Troy to get him in their program. And his brother plays for them as well. His brother was a transfer up there who's on the team also. But yeah, Rigsby this past season, Sun Belt freshman of the year, 11.3 points per game, 4.3 rebounds, 1.5 assists, 1.5 turnovers, 1.6 steals, and 0.4 blocks per game. 44.1% from the field, 41.1% from three, and 82.4% at the charity stripe. Really interesting player. Like I don't have like too definitive on a take at him at this point, other than like he was young and really productive, and I think he's good and has like interesting physical traits and indicators. But what did you see on the tape with Myles Rigsby?
So I want to ask a question, because right now he's listed at about 6'6", 190. He'll be 20 years old on draft night. Do you have a wingspan for him?
I do not. have a Myles Rigsby wingspan,
because his wingspan seems neutral on the tape, and it could be like that's just something that stood out to me. Is like he didn't seem as long as some of these other players, but I thought that his build is nice though. He's got like nice broad shoulders. He looks strong out there, despite the wingspan, but plays through contact, decent passing instincts, gets to the rim at a decent clip. Ball travels a long way on his shooting motion though, and that's the thing that I would like to see cleaned up. Is like, while the efficiency was pretty decent for a 3-point shot there, it looks like it takes a long time for the ball to get there. I think he's got a little bit of a handle, probably more so in like that Cedric Coward type mold, maybe a little bit better, but not by much. He does a decent amount of like stop and survey, which does kind of bug me a little bit. He's not like one of these like 0.5 decision makers, but again, lightly recruited guy playing at Troy, freshman, has a lot of pressure. He's probably having to let the speed slow down, which is why he's holding on to the ball a little bit. But I do think that he is a good athlete. He looks good in transition. And I think that he is faster than what the pace of play at Troy allows him to show. You know what I mean? Because it seems like the games that I was able to watch of him, that it's very half court oriented, a lot of ball movement until it gets to him. And then it's like, I'm going to try to break you down in quick bursts. But he looks like he's a lot faster on some of these like little moments of brilliance that I've seen from him, that go away from kind of like that half court offense. So I think the athleticism is there. But offensively, I just think that he's one of these, I think that you described it beautifully, Maxwell. It's like he's productive. I don't necessarily know what his best skill set is right now.
Sure.
Because he's balls in his hand a lot and he is very strong, but it's not like I'm breaking you down off the dribble. It's just kind of like I am
just sort of
bullying my way to the basket and scoring, which you kind of love
to see that as
a young guy,
Especially because like college basketball is so old right now that it's like to be doing that as an 18-year-old, because this is a late birthday guy. Like that's really impressive. The free throw rate was wild. He had a .716 free throw rate. Took 7.2 field goals per game, but 5.1 free throws per game. Like he lives at the line. He gets fouled all the time because he's really strong and like you just have to do it. Like he's going to get to the basket otherwise. Really, really good getting downhill. And doing so just unassisted by himself. Like a little bit of like herky jerky, a little bit of like ball screen manipulation, but also just some real burst and power to him. Did a really good job running the pick and roll. The 3-point shot I think is interesting. Like, so the volume was low. It was 4.1 attempts per 100 or 3.9 attempts per 100 possessions, 41.1% from deep. The Scott Cross like buys the shot a lot. Like he was saying, like if the volume is high, like he still thinks he'd be high 30s. It's just like they want him to get downhill and like he's really good at it. No one can stop him. So like it's more a function of he gets to the basket a lot than like this kid's kind of afraid to shoot. And I think you see it in like the free throw numbers too. Like he has the touch. I do think I'm a little bit more into the release than you are. Like I do think he gets it off pretty quickly. I think the mechanics off the hop are pretty consistent. Like he's not totally afraid. I wish he was a little bit more willing to pull some of them, but I think that's fine. Defensively, I like him a lot. Like he's really intense and active guarding the ball, especially like on 1s and 2s, like generates a ton of strips, like whether it's his man or just like the quick dig and take it away from somebody else. Like really good guarding ball screens, really good guarding in isolation, but rotationally, like just knows how to get all over the place. Good positional block rate at 1.7, kind of knows when to gamble and when not to. They play a really aggressive defensive scheme, but when you play a scheme like that, you also have to kind of know like what you can and can't get. So I don't think it's a case of like he just goes for it all the time. So he gets a lot of steals. 3.4 steal percentage last year. So really, really active player. I think like what I ultimately just come down to is like this is a long-term guy. I think it can look a lot of different ways. Like I think it could look like some of his numbers were kind of similar to like what Nickeil Alexander-Walker did as a freshman. So part of me is like, please turn into a combo guard. Like, please turn into like a guy who can really operate with the ball in his hands and then like make stuff happen on defense and then slot next to like a jumbo playmaker and be like the second side guy. Like that's something I'd really like to see. But I also think given just the efficiency of the shot and the fact that within the program, they sort of buy it, maybe he does just turn into like a traditional 3-and-D wing who can also like work his way to the rim. That's a possibility too. Like I said in the article, like I think the world is his oyster. Like he could be Alec Burks, he could be Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Like there's just like a lot of different ways that he can kind of pursue his development based on what's coming naturally to him and what his sort of predilections are as time goes on. So I like him a lot. I think it's just like really early to be like, this is what Myles Rigsby is.
Oh,
I don't think we know. Like I just think he's good and eventually he figures it out.
Yeah, I think that, offensively, we're kind of like, I don't know what he's going to be. That speaks to like the malleability, the fact that he is already so strong, that he's got a great frame. The shoulders are so broad. The fact that he can put pressure on the defense, like right off of the rip. And it's one of those things too, Maxwell, like these smaller conferences, they don't really have like the the overall depth of like an Alabama or a Kentucky or a Gonzaga, you know, schools like that where they can put in lineups specifically for certain types of things. Where like for Troy to have Myles Rigsby, it's just kind of like, we need you to do the thing that you're best at. Like maybe we'll develop some of these other things throughout the year, but by and large, like we're going to hone in on the things that you're good at. Defensively, I thought that the good hands defensively spoke to me. The tendency to lose his man and help and deny, I think, is just a fact that he's playing D1 basketball as a freshman.
Yeah.
Right. He doesn't have like uber impressive tools, which I think leads to like his matchup scoring a little bit more than what you would like to see. I think that he's going to guard twos and maybe some threes. Some improved strength, especially lower body strength, can improve his burst and on-ball defense. But I do think that he's a capable rebounder, needs to improve as a decision maker, but the instincts are there. You know, it's like he's seeing the right things. It's just, how do I get there? How do I adjust and account for the change of speed? I think that he has, like how you said, the world is his oyster. I think that's beautifully put. I think that he's got so much runway ahead of him to improve. And the fact that he has the size, like that's the key thing too, right? That like 6'6", just shy of 200 pounds, and he's so young and so strong and can play to his strengths already. I think that there's no shortage of outcomes for him as he continues to progress in his college career.
For sure. So we're going to go to our last one here. This is going to be fun because I think I'm quite high on this guy, and I think you were a little bit lower based on our text conversations that we had. Kimani Hamilton from High Point.
Yeah, I hate him just because I'm not as high on him as you. Like I have to hate the guy.
No. Yeah. I think we're just like, I think I'm really optimistic about Kimani.
You're definitely more bullish. Yeah.
Yeah. So Kimani, Hamilton is 6'7", 6'8" at High Point. He's going to be a junior this coming year. The son of Tang Hamilton, who played at Mississippi State. Cool story here. Him and his dad, the first father-son duo to win Mississippi Gatorade Player of the Year in high school. Hamilton. Yeah.
Did not know that. That's bad. That's bad. Or that's awesome. Excuse me.
Yeah, you're fine. We're fine. Other people swear on the feed. We can do it if we want.
Sure.
So Hamilton was like a pretty highly touted recruit. He had a 4-star label from 24/7. He played on Team Thad alongside Jalen Hood-Schifino, who the Lakers drafted last year. Like, had some real buzz. Goes to Mississippi State. One of those situations where like the coach that recruited him was not there anymore, if I'm recalling correctly. So like, just kind of an odd little fit. Didn't see the floor much. Ended up hitting the portal. Really liked High Point. Like, they were the first school to contact him. He loved his visit there. Really likes the program as a whole. Like, one of those guys, it's not like, sometimes you see it where it's not, I don't want to say like transactional, but sometimes you get the thing where it's like, they brought me in and I can score a lot of points here. So I like it. Like, he was very just like,
got a pretty good teammate too.
The program is underrated. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Justin Bodo, who we talked about 2 weeks ago, but like genuinely like loves the program there as well. Had the highest BPM on the team. They went 27-9. He was all Big South first team. And again, he's going to be going back there for his junior year. 14.9 points per game, 7.2 rebounds, 2.3 assists to only 1.6 turnovers, 1.2 steals, 0.7 blocks, 46.9% from the field, 28.2% from three, and 79.8% from the free throw line. So let's do, I don't know. That's because again, like, we're not like, it's not like you think Kimani Hamilton stinks, but we'll do some good cop, bad cop. So I'll give like my like rosy optimistic version, and you can kind of outline like why you're maybe not as into him. So I think there's like a chance for him to develop into one of those like Terrence Mann, like Josh Green, Evan Turner style players are the three like that he reminds me of a little bit, like the sort of do it all wing. Really good at playing with the ball in his hands, like pressures the rim a lot. Almost 47% of the shots in the half court came to the rim. A guy who draws a ton of fouls and is almost an 80% free throw shooter. So just by virtue of like getting deep into the paint a lot, getting the free throw line a lot, he's going to create high efficiency looks for himself. And because he can see the floor really well, he generates high efficiency looks for others as well. Had an assist rate of 14, pretty low turnover for the most part. 78th percentile on pick and roll possessions, including passes, 87% on ISOs, including passes. Like, from an NBA where like ball skills are just so important, this guy who is in that 6'7", 6'8" category, 225 pounds, pro frame, good first step, good handle, good passing ability, like gets to the rim. Like, I love all of that. Defensively, I think he gets after it a lot. He takes pride in his defense. Really physical guy. Held opponents to like low field goal percentages. Like guys didn't get the easiest looks against him. He can spring to contest, can use his body well, good steal and block rates, like combined, like both steal and block rates over 2, good defensive rebounder, good offensive rebounder too, for that matter. But just a guy where like I watched them play and he is constantly just leaving his fingerprints all over the game. And when I see that in a guy with like a really good frame for the NBA, I get really excited about it. I do think the question is the shot. I'll let you touch on that a little bit more. But did not have a good shooting year last year, like under 30% from 3. The volume was good, and I like that he took like some deeper ones too, but does pass up a good amount of shots. Reminds me of like where Jalen Slauson was as a shooter after like his like sophomore or junior year, where it's like the percentage isn't great and you're passing up a lot of them. And Slauson eventually got the percentage like where it needed to be to get him into draftable consideration, where like with Kimani, we haven't seen that yet. And hopefully that happens this year, but like the shot's a real concern. And without the shot, then like the handle, the ability to get downhill, like all that stuff just sort of dissipates and he doesn't have a way to provide off ball value at the next level. So I think if you're going to say like, why could it not work? It's definitely that. But I think with him being on the younger side and just finally getting like a real season of college basketball under his belt, if he can really workshop the jumper this year and get it to a point where it's respectable, then I think he's a year away from like potentially being a guy that gets drafted in 2026.
Yeah, so going to be 21 on draft night.
Mm-hmm.
I'll touch on the offense first. You know,
Sure.
The shooting mechanics. Very first thing I wrote in my notes, like interesting shooting mechanics. It's just like the shot is ugly, right? And I think that that's why the efficiency is where it is. Is just because it starts on one side of his body. He's kind of like left shooting pocket, rises up, comes across to right shoulder type thing. It's ugly, right?
Yeah,
but
it's kind of Leonard and Millardy too, right? Like the Leonard Miller style, like it's very push motion.
Yeah, very push motion without the lower body twist. He's not afraid to shoot it though, which I do give him credit for that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he does have good speed, good leaper, not a bad ball mover, but not someone that I'm really looking to make a lot of plays with the pass. Good body control, nice touch in traffic, active on the boards, fairly strong, good size and length. And I think that he moves well with the ball in his hand. Like it's very interesting, his offense, because he is so imposing. He's got such great length and such strength, but there's like a level of finesse and feel to like his drives and stuff like that, which I love a lot. I think just you and I, we see two different players defensively. You know, in a lot of the games that I watch, I think that he gets behind off of the ball defensively. I think that he loses his man pretty frequently. I think that he needs to improve his footwork to maintain position on the ball, particularly like he crosses his feet a lot as opposed to like gets low, chops his feet and slides. And I think that he switches like almost to a fault. Oftentimes, like even prior to like contact, it's like a super like get out ahead of the switch type move. But I do think that he's got like, obviously there's some feel and instinct there to where he can recover and he can like make plays in a passing lane, or he can, you know, get out ahead of the ball. Like as it's coming up, he can make plays on the ball on its way up in the shooting motion, things like that. I just think that it's a little bit more sloppy defensively than what I was anticipating coming in, right? Because when we see like these forwards who are in college, they're 6'7", 220, 225, like in that neighborhood, you kind of, especially like these like smaller school guys, right? You kind of feel them a little bit more defensively. And I really just was left wanting a lot more on that defensive end, which is why he was so low. I think that out of this group of 5, I felt like if he was a better defender, I would have been a little bit more higher on him.
Sure.
But then again, it's like I like Moni a lot just because he's funky on the offensive end, but like defensively, it's not good. You know what I mean? But I think and this is why that's why I brought Moni up, is because I think the shot and the playmaking is very real with him. And I think at his size, it's so interesting. Whereas for Kimani, it's like you're 6'7", so you're about an average like wing forward size. You can't shoot, and the defense isn't where I'd like to see. So I think I would go with like more of the ceiling of a Moni as opposed to a Hamilton.
I think that's more than fair. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is going to be, and like we talk about this quite a bit, like privately too, is just like for role players in the NBA, like their 3-point rates are just so high. Like so much of it is just like, what can you do off the ball? And like Kimani Hamilton has this great skill set, but like it just comes back to like, if you cannot get the defense to respect you, it does not matter. Like it does not matter at all if you can't shoot.
Especially you can't play make to boot, right? Like if you're not like
I think he can. Like I'm a little bigger on it, but it's just the classic. Like, well, why would you? Like, why would you have him make plays if he's not a threat to pull up shoot or like gonna have guys sag on him? Like I think it's something.
I think in college you can do that a little bit more, right? Like a Kevin McCullough, right?
Yes.
Or
like I just
those
don't think it's
players.
Translatable. Like he's never going to be the guy that you run something for in the NBA. And if they're not going to run something for you, then what value are you bringing? Because like it's really hard.
Speaks more to like the connectivity, maybe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like that's what I would say for like a role player scaling up.
Yeah. So I'm interested in Kimani because I think that there is a chance based on work ethic, like some character stuff that I've heard, and like the free throw percentage that he does start to shoot, and like even just interviewing him, like he's not happy with how he shot. Like he bluntly did not like how he shot it last season. And this is the guy who gave like very thorough answers to every question. And then like when I was like, what have you been working on? He was immediately just like, I didn't like how I shot last season. Like he was just immediately like, didn't like it. And like was just kind of like, I'm working at it. And like a very like in a way that made me take it quite seriously that he's working at it. But like I thought it was really telling and sort of interesting. I liked the answer. You never know what you're gonna get with like guys like this. You never know like, hey, next season is he gonna shoot it? Or like I loved Mark Mitchell last season. I liked Mark Mitchell for a lot of the same reasons. I thought Mark Mitchell could put it on the deck. I thought he could make good decisions. I thought he could defend multiple positions. And Mark Mitchell was a brutal 3-point shooter last year. Like you don't know. So I'd like to believe that Kimani is going to shoot it. If he does, I think he's so complete. Like he'll be one of the most complete prospects in mid-major basketball, just in terms of like well-rounded skill set, size, and athleticism. Like you don't see guys like that at the mid-major level. But if the shot doesn't go in, then I don't know. Like then is he just like less functionally athletic Alan Flanagan with worse defense?
Super.
You know what I mean? Like that's like
that's an outcome though.
Yeah, it is. It is. And that's why I think it's like reasonable to be like, I'm not thrilled about this guy. I think he's interesting, but I'm more wait and see. Whereas I'm kind of like, I'm going to put some high point games on the calendar early in the year, which I don't think most people are doing, to be fair. But
I mean, we will, you know.
Yeah.
And I think he's a very
they play
fun
UAB
player.
early in the year. That's a prospect matchup there, baby.
Yes, the prospect bowl right there, right? I mean, you got Bodo up against Yaxel. That's going to be such a fun game. But that's what makes these guys stones, Maxwell.
Yeah, exactly.
There's the risk reward aspect of them as prospects, you know, and I think that this is a very deserving shout, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of redeemable stuff to his game, but as a group of 5 that you've given, like I'm excited for parts 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Because like this was such a fun group of wing players to go in and look at.
Yeah. And I think part 2, I don't want to like play favorites. I think part 2 might be my favorite group. Do you want to do the part 2 unveil?
Yeah, I think we have to. I think tradition says that we got to do that. And I got my pencil down too. I'm writing it down so I can track along. Part
2, we've talked about this guy a lot privately. Leading off part 2 will be Igor Milicic Jr., the up transfer from Charlotte to Tennessee. I had good luck on a Tennessee up transfer last year, hoping to
did.
That outcome again.
Tennessee is just like, is that Sicko University almost? You know
I think so.
Like,
between him, Chaz Lanier, and Darlin Stone Dubar, like all in one transfer cycle, you love to see it. Love to see.
I love Chaz, man. Chaz is going to be so good for them.
Baller. He's so good. We've got Jacob Cruz, and up transfer from UT Martin to Missouri.
He's an old man now.
He is. We're hoping for the Blake Hinson, Brandon Carlson two-way special on that one. We've got Javon Buchanan, an up transfer from Indiana Wesleyan to Boise State this coming season. We have Amari Tice, who is staying put at Quinnipiac after a big breakout year for them. And then last year we've got a stat sheet sicko shout. Caden Pierce from Princeton.
Ooh, yes.
Caden Pierce, very
Princeton
interesting. Another real prospect team at the mid-major level between him and Xavion Lee. Like Xavion Lee is the name that people know, but I think that is people watch more Xavion Lee, people are going to start to be interested in Caden Pierce because he's one of the rare.
Had like a weird following. Like I feel like 2 cycles ago there was like this little hive that started buzzing around him.
I think people that watched him, I think it was like Bizarro St. Thomas, where like St. Thomas came into college and all the prep people were like, St. Thomas is really good. And like, he just didn't like kind of produce right away because like contextually just wasn't the right environment. And I think Caden is like the opposite, where like there were prep people that were like, hey, he's really good. And then he was really good just because of the environment that he was in. But him and Xavion are going to be the 2 guys that were like awesome mid-major players that both stayed put. That it's hard to imagine a scenario where Caden's not averaging like 18 and 9 next season and like 4 assists.
Yeah,
like that's it's going to happen.
With Lee, especially when Xavion like feeding him. You know, Xavion feeding Pierce is they play so well off of each other. That's going to be such a fun duo to watch.
Yeah. So that's the 5 for our next edition. That's going to be the Wings Part 2. So stay tuned for that. Stephen, anything you've got cooking up on your side over there?
I've just been doing my my preseason player profiles. I'm up to 85 now. Oof. That 5 will put me at 90, and I'm still kind of like cruising through. I've recently gone through my Mark Sears film dive, and I'm kind of in a Tyler Metcalf type of vibe with him coming up this year. I went back and watched some of his Bobcat film when he was with Ohio. That was such a fun team, and I even went back in my Twitter feed and was like, I gotta have something of him when he was in Ohio because I liked him a lot.
You put me on to him when he was at Ohio. We did like a podcast way back when, and you were like, oh yeah, and Mark Sears at Ohio. And I was like, I haven't seen any of that guy. And you were like, oh yeah, check him out. Like I remember like finding out about Mark Sears through you. So
I loved him, and then I hated him. And now I'm back to a loving spot with him. I think it's gonna be so fun.
I'm excited. Who is on? Isn't Alabama's roster like real funky this year? If we do like
Alabama
talk here, because didn't they get like? I feel like they went wild with the big man transfers.
They got Cliff Omiuri from
Omiuri. That's right.
Yeah.
So they have him and Grant Nelson. Yeah. Oh, Sam Walters left. They've got Jaron Stevenson still.
They got Jaron Stevens. They got Nas Cunningham, like just chilling at the end of their rotation. And Nas is the dude that like Corey has loved. I've like really liked a lot. Saw him at OTE. Alabama is just stupid deep this year, man.
Oh my gosh.
Omiuri coming in.
And like Chris Youngblood, wasn't he like AAC Player of the Year last year?
Yep. Like, he's a transfer in. They got Reed too, another high recruit.
Darian Reed.
Yeah, Darian Reed
is going to be good. Here.
Yeah, man. They're nasty. They could mess around and win a title next year, dude. Like Alabama's stupid deep.
Yeah, that is a fascinating team. All right. Well, I think that'll do it. So we will wrap it up here, and we will see everybody again probably in about 2 weeks. So take it easy, sickos. Enjoy the offseason. Subscribe. Give us a like on YouTube. NoCeilingsNBA.com. Get a premium subscription. We're doing a lot of stuff on No Ceilings Plus this offseason. So stay plugged in for that. Until next time, we will see you later.
Much love, y'all.